It is not your average Steve Martin movie. It's called Leap of Faith. And in the movie, Steve Martin plays Jonas Nightingale, revival preacher, healer, con man. And Martin's character employs all the slick, sick tricks we see huckster preachers employ in our own time. He even employs the mind-reading trick that is carried off through the use of a little radio receiver in the person's ear that was used by Peter Popoff. Peter Popoff, incidentally, was the huckster preacher who got revealed on The Tonight Show when a professional magician brought his own radio receiver into one of Popoff's church meetings. But what makes the movie interesting, I think, is basically two things. First, 90% of the people involved in the ministry believe it's real. It's all on the up and up. The gospel choir, the children traveling with the ministry. Most of the workers all believe this is a good ministry. Only Steve Martin and his manager, played by Deborah Winger, and a few trusted associates in charge of getting actors who pretend that they are being healed are in on the scam. Everyone else believes, especially a little crippled boy that Steve Martin meets in his travels. The second thing that makes the movie interesting involves that boy and what happens near the end of the movie. You see, one night in the midst of the revival, that little crippled boy comes up for healing. And you can see it in the preacher's face. He doesn't want this kid to come forward. He doesn't want to fail him. He doesn't want to break his heart. He doesn't want to take his faith, a faith that frankly he does not share. And so he tries to ignore him, dissuade him. He tells him no. He says, I don't have any healing power left tonight. But the choir is singing. The people are praying. And this little boy will not take no for an answer. And then slowly but surely, it happens. It happens anyway. A healing. A real miracle occurs. And the preacher's response? The preacher, Steve Martin's character, is so overwhelmed. His ideas about Jesus are so shaken up. His worldview is so turned upside down that he has no choice but to leave. He disappears in the middle of the night, walks away from it all, to go and wrestle with this idea of the power of God. An idea he never thought was real, but that he's now seen in action. Not your average Steve Martin movie. From there we move to a story of spirits and pigs. And in this story, it's tough to be a pig. Jesus meets a man whose illness allows him to break chains, whose illness allows him to toss people who would bind him aside like they're paper dolls. And of course, these spirits, who are many, they are called legion, recognize Jesus right away. Son of God, they say. Long before the disciples realized that this is the case. And it's a story of the spirits begging Jesus, please Jesus, the pigs, send us into the pigs, not to the abyss. Send us to the pigs. A story of Jesus complying. Okay. And then a story of those pigs rushing down the side of a hill, drowning themselves in the lake, and creating a very unkosher soup. And what is the result? What happens when the people come to see Jesus and they see this man now clothed in his right mind, talking to Jesus? Lord, please leave. Please leave us. Go away from here. like Steve Martin in the movie Leap of Faith. They have witnessed the power of God, and they're overwhelmed, even frightened. We can be a lot like that character in that Steve Martin movie. Now, he was Christian in name only, and hopefully we're not there. But he really didn't think God had power. He really didn't think God could enter his life and change it. I don't know if the people in Gerasene believed God could enter their lives in this way. I mean, after all, they were Greek. They worshipped very different gods. But they probably also made a lot of fun of their God-crazy Jewish neighbors who were circumcised and obviously ate a very different diet. But when they get a whiff of the power of Jesus, they want none of this. Maybe their gods weren't quite so in their face. And to be fair, if a holy man showed up in your backyard and drowned 2,000 of your pigs, you might ask him to politely move along too. But sometimes it's easy to think God doesn't have power. I mean, we've all seen healing, but it's rare to see the lame walk. And if you look at the world around us, it seems like the world operates with a different set of rules. Rules that often seem to exclude God. Rules that might even give us the impression that we are in charge. And that illusion that we're in charge really is only possible because God has given us free will. God has given us the ability to make our own decisions, to choose right from wrong, even when those decisions hurt us or other people. But the truth is, God does have power. God has more power than we imagine. God has so much power that if we choose to believe it, it might give us a little pause. At the age of 32, a broken, penniless man whose daughter had died and whose business misadventures had made him a social outcast stood on the edge of Lake Michigan. Life had crippled him. It was night. He was alone. And he had found the perfect place to end it all. And as he stood there contemplating his fate, what he thought were going to be his last moments, a voice came to him. And that voice said, "You do not have the right to take your life. You do not belong to yourself. You are a gift to the universe." And the man found himself suddenly filled with power and drive. And from that moment on, he began living a new life with a new rule, that anything he would do, anything, would be for the good of all people. Not for himself, but for the good of all. That man was Buckminster Fuller, one of the most remarkable individuals of the last century. He taught us many things. He became an architect, an engineer, a designer, a poet, a futurist. He is the one who told us God is a verb. If you've been to Disney, down to Epcot, that huge geodesic dome that you see, that's his invention. And it bears the name Spaceship Earth, which is the name Buckminster Fuller gave our own planet. One of the most extraordinary human beings ever to live. And yet he did not even start walking until he was 32 years old. And yet he chose to employ all his talents, all his abilities, and focus them on the good of all people. He actively seized upon the idea that if he trusted God, God would take care of the rest. Even to the point where he ceased to actively be concerned about earning a living. Now, I'm not recommending that, but it worked. But of course it also meant for him letting go. Something he admitted at times he wasn't that good at. And accepting the power of God, of this Jesus, means letting go. Accepting the power of God means taking what God is offering and letting our Lord and everything our Lord stands for steer the ship. It means, in a sense, allowing Jesus to send our less than better natures off into the pigs. Oh yes, they come back. They do. But it means allowing the power of God to guide us rather than relying on ourselves. Scary, isn't it? No wonder Steve Martin's character ran off into the night. No wonder the Gerasene people said, please, Jesus, just go. Letting go and diving into the power wave, the tidal wave, that is the power of God, is scary. But at the same time, why would you want to miss the ride?